Privet, dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, bonjour, hola, good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Ken at 10, and here we are yet again, another beautiful spring day here in Norbury, Southwest London, Southwest 16. And thank you for joining us. If you're here yet again, then thank you, welcome back. And if it's the first time on the channel, then thank you for coming. We're James Alexander Estate Agents, and we're based in Norbury. Norbury is an area which has Streatham to the north and Croydon to the south. We're a bit of a thoroughfare, so I like to let people know where we are, that we are here and we're on the map, and it's a nice place to be, to invest, good place for first-time buyers, good for commuters. If you think of investing in property for a good, solid buy-to-let investment, then we're good for that too. And we'd love to hear from you if you're interested in investing or buying locally, even if you're not actually. We just love talking about property. It's what we do. Hope you're having a good day. Well, the sun's out. It's a great day here in Norbury. Lots of people that I'm speaking to got their first choice in terms of primary schools, because that's just happened. And that's a big thing when you're a parent and you're worried about that primary school place. You know, I know a lot of people, that would have been a lot of pressure. So I hope you got your choice. And if you didn't, then there's always the opportunity maybe to move to an area where you can get the choice that's better for you. And we can help you with that too. But hopefully you don't have to move for that, and you've got the choice that you want. And secondary schooling, of course, that's even bigger. It always feels more monumental to me. And certainly I remember from my children going from primary to secondary school, a massive moment in our lives, and really did bring some tension, especially with grammar school exams and things like that. So I hope you've done well on that, and I hope it's been okay for you and your children. And I hope you enjoyed the school holidays as well. Now they're back. Spring is in full swing. And what I mean by that is this is now the time when we start to get really busy, and it continues right the way through until late June. And then July, August tends to quieten down a little bit. Some news on house prices for you today, which really quite shocking, particularly London house prices. And I'll come on to that in a little while. A few other items of news that I wanted to run through with you as usual here on the channel, because that's what we do. We talk about property. Why? Because we love it. It's what we do. We buy, we sell. We're at the coalface every day. We're speaking to people that are buying, selling, talking about the market. And because we're doing that on a daily basis, we're really getting sentiment that we can pass on to you from people that are really buying and selling. They're in the middle of this, how they're feeling, what the competition's like out there, you know, why they're buying, what's driving them to their decisions. It's really interesting, actually. Most of the time at the moment, what's happened is people are excited about the potential of growth for the UK property market. They're confident in the market, and this is a great thing. When that confidence is around, we find people make buying decisions quite rapidly. Because they make those decisions quite rapidly, we tend to find that we get multiple offers if a property is on at a competitive price. And then from there, our job becomes one of advising which way to go as far as the seller is concerned. So, you know, I was just reading an article actually where somebody, a first-time buyer in one of the forums I'm on, was complaining of the way that agents handle offers. And I must say, some agents are quite rude, and I don't think there's ever an excuse for rudeness. And I know, buyers, it can be really frustrating for you as well. Bear in mind a couple of things. The agent does act for the seller. It doesn't give them an excuse to be arrogant or rude to you. 100% no. But it does sway where they're sitting and what they're doing. So if they're defending the price they're quoting or asking you for more money, that's because that's what they're paid to do. So you have to get a bit of perspective on that. And I know it's frustrating out there, but my advice is, as I've said many times before, make sure you have all the information, proof of your deposit, your solicitors ready, so that they can have confidence in you and your ability. Be the nice person that I'm sure you are. Try not to get too stressed out with the agent, because that can come across, and then they can think you're a nervy kind of person and perhaps put you behind another buyer, because the competition is really fierce out there now. And agents are quite often asked, especially bearing in mind, you know, most of the time people are trusting the agent with their biggest asset, and therefore they do have this bond of trust between agent and client. And often when there are two offers and they're very close together, it won't necessarily be about the money. It'll be about the agent and the client sitting together or down the phone saying, well, what do you think? You know, what do you think, agent? What do you think, Ken? Which buyer should I go with? And it's awful, because people have to lose, but also we need to make the best decision based on the business side of it for the client on the one hand, and also the humanity side on the other. You know, families, that's really appealing to a lot of my clients. It does pull the emotional strings. But on the other hand, buy to let, that's business. It can be that if we've got a regular buy to let investor, it's more likely to go through because they've done it all before. They're less likely to be scared by survey. They often hold a higher deposit. And where you hold a higher deposit now, by the way, quite often we're seeing what we call desktop valuations. Now, this may be a term that's not familiar to you, but this is where the lender, instead of actually going to visit the property, will literally pull it up on Google Maps, the surveyor that is, pull it up on Google Maps, do a little bit of research, and then sign it off without even physically going through the door of the property. That does happen all the time now, particularly with buy-to-let mortgages where there's a deposit of 25% or more. That means that the larger deposit buyers do hold a bit of an advantage over the first-time buyers, where the surveyor will have to visit. The likelihood is on that visit, they may pull up something that's of concern, and they may hold what we call a retention, i.e. hold back part of that loan. And that can be a real worry and a pressure for the seller and the buyer. And also, if you've only got 10% deposit and then something does come up where there's a retention, you may not have the funds to put in the difference to make the deal still work, or maybe requesting a reduction in the price. And that's also a worry for sellers. So have to weigh up all these things. But quite often the buyers, the first-time buyers will come in with the higher offers, and the buy-to-let investors slightly lower. And then there's another decision to make. Do you go with the certainty maybe, or the more likelihood of the buyer with a higher deposit, or do you go with the money? That's a judgment call. It depends how much money, doesn't it? Sometimes we could be talking 10, 20, 50,000 pounds. And the question is, at what point do you say, well, actually, that's too much money to miss for my family. I'd rather roll the dice with someone perhaps in a slightly inferior position in the hope that it goes through, rather than go with something that's more certain, but perhaps at a lower level. It's always a discussion and a debate that we have with our clients daily. Now, Bank of England, the Telegraph reports that the Bank of England is looking to make the banking system more British since Brexit, apparently. Sounds like a government line to me, a bit of a distraction from everything else going on. But what they say is the mortgages are going to be simpler, and they're going to be able to cut prices because they're going to be able to do things in a different way post the EU. So that's an interesting thing to see. Will it release the mortgage market in a big way? I hope so. But I think against that, and this is the thing you have to consider later on this year, and it comes into house prices, what next, what I was talking about in the theme of the video today, is that lenders are going to be considering the new expenses that you have. And that is that your fuel bills are up, your petrol bills are up, your gas, your electric, everything is up. Inflation is rampant. Therefore, the affordability criterion that they currently use may be changed. And that may reduce the amount that they're able to lend to you. And that could be a real factor in the market going forward, and could be a restricting factor. After all, if people can't afford to buy, then it does impact the market. The market is underpinned, however, by buy-to-let. Back in the 90s, buy-to-let was invented, believe it or not. It wasn't before that. We didn't have such a thing. It was actually brought about by Arla in association with some mortgage lenders and the Bank of England. And they came up with this new product, the buy-to-let loan. And this created a generation of landlords, really small landlords, back from the early 90s. And now it's a very established sector. And of course, they've changed the rules so many times now. Many landlords are considering that it's not the easy route that it was to riches. Of course, in my view, you've always got to work at anything if you want to make it work properly. But the beauty about buy-to-let investment was, and still is, the passive nature of the investment. In most cases, you can do up a property, make sure it's safe, clean, and a healthy environment for your tenants, make sure it complies with all the regulations, move someone in, and then literally the income will come. You don't have to do any work for that on a monthly basis, other than make sure that it's monitored and inspected. So the level of effort required in that sense is quite small. And that's the beauty of buy-to-let investment. Over time, two things will happen. The rents will go up. So you'll keep pace with inflation, because rents tend to be inflation proof. They go up when inflation goes up, and the capital value will go up. So you're winning on both sides of that equation. And that can mean that when it comes to refinance time, you can release some cash, or you can go on to use that cash to buy another property, or you can get a better loan rate because now the loan to value is lower. So there are many ways that you can adjust and gradually move that through. And many people are using this now as a supplement for their children's school fees in the future, for their pension fund. We have many, many pensioners now that use and rely on buy-to-let. Because it's been such a hedge against inflation for them over the years. So it's not just the typical, we get this impression that landlords are these like smoking big cigars and on yachts and things. And it's not. It's Mr. and Mrs. Average that are taking a risk, in my experience, more often than not. Now, energy costs will prove catastrophic is another heading I see. And this is coming through in a lot of the headlines in the papers. And yeah, I do believe this could be a big problem. We've already had these massive rises. They're just starting to hit people in the pocket now as those bills arrive on doormats. And we've got another increase coming up later in the year. I think the government need to get hold of this if they want to be re-elected. I think they need to do something quite drastic in the way of maybe cutting back on some of the subsidies that are involved in that bill, the taxes that are involved in those bills. I think they need to help people more than they are. And that has to come through if they want to stay in office. That's my view. But we'll see what happens there. 2 years ago today, I was on this camera, sat in this office on my own. We were in the middle of lockdown, and we were raising money with Norbury Manor Business and Enterprise College, and they were making PPE, and they were actually giving away their goggles to local NHS workers and key workers, and they were making PPE protection equipment because there wasn't enough to go around. Seems a long time ago, but we actually had an appeal going. We raised thousands, and it was a fantastic thing. But it does just make you realize it wasn't that long ago that we're all in the middle of this extraordinary situation. And here we are again now, released from that. We're in the middle of the Ukraine war. Always seems there's something at the moment, extraordinary times we live in. But the most extraordinary thing for me, and the thing that always occurs to me, is I never thought I'd be in a time when people were actually literally at the other end of the scale, the poverty end of the scale, were choosing whether to heat or eat, and actually struggling to get a roof over their heads. So, there is a massive wealth divide. The middle classes are tending to do quite well, better than they expected. But those that are on the breadline are really suffering more than they ever have. And it's a terrible situation. I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly something that is a huge problem. And the affordability crisis with rents is likely to get larger because the government is doing nothing about it. And they'll blame landlords. Yes, they'll blame landlords. Why? Because landlords are trying to make a profit from the rentals. Well, with the price of housing, you have to bear in mind that if a new landlord comes in and invests, they have to pay these high house prices, and then they have to cover that loan. And if they don't cover that loan, they're actually losing money. So for that reason, it's not the landlords that are at fault. The fact is that we don't build enough social housing. We haven't been building enough social housing, and the government need to incentivize the smaller landlord to provide accommodation, not tax against them so that they exit the sector, as has been happening in the past. And I think we're at a pivotal point now where the government needs to start incentivizing the small landlord back into the market because they can't provide enough accommodation from their own sources. And the idea of the PRS was going to be professionalized with all these big corporates coming in and swallowing up all the rental market. And it has changed. There is build to rent, but it's too little, too late. There's just not enough around. So the government really need to legislate on that, in my view. Now, the average house prices, depends where you look, but in London, the average house price, in my view, is hitting a new high, and it's looking like at the moment, if you look on Rightmove, the average house price in London is 681,000. That's massive, isn't it? 681,000. Zoopla, their average house price, it's measured in slightly different ways. That's why you get different figures. Theirs is 715,000. Rightmove, I tend to rely on a little bit more because they are the biggest portal in the UK, and they are at just under 700,000. But I think they'll be breaking that 700,000 barrier very, very soon. So be interesting to see where that goes. But it's massive, isn't it? It's just huge, crazy. Tenant demand is up massively. I mean, literally, it's up. Hundreds and hundreds of people looking, very little stock available. Landlords are able to pick and choose and increase rents fairly readily with a good supply of new people coming to London. And that's what's happened, really. That's been the massive turnaround. It wasn't that long ago the market was struggling and rents were actually staying static, as they have done for a long time here in London. But now all of a sudden the crisis has made the situation even worse, and not enough builds were made. New builds. And so when you do a new build above a certain size, you have to provide social housing, because not many of those have done over the pandemic. So that's exacerbated the crisis. On top of that, we have a situation where a lot of landlords are exiting the market due to the extra taxes the government have put on in the last few years. And you put that together, and it is a recipe for disaster as far as rental is concerned. So if you're a tenant, my heart goes out to you. I do understand it's really difficult for you out there. If you're a minister, listen up. You need to do something to help the smaller landlord, to help those that need, because what you need is higher supply. And without higher supply, this is going to continue to get worse. So that's it for today. Apart from that, a couple of good valuations coming up. The sun is out. It's always a nice time to be out there and looking around. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition. I'm also preparing the podcast for tomorrow as well. So looking forward to doing that for you. As you may know, we missed that last week. So sorry if you were looking forward to that, but we'll make sure it gets done. And we get a bit more meat on the bone in the podcast. We're able to get a bit more detail down because it's a little bit longer. So I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for watching. Look after yourselves, and if you can, your family and friends. Speak tomorrow. Ciao.